This right here is an Egyptian roast leg of lamb, and after marinating for over 12 hours and cooking for almost 4 more, it is insanely tender and flavourful. In the Middle East, lamb is usually served as the centerpiece dish for most celebrations, and nearly every country has a unique take on it. Today I wanted to show you this recipe, which is really easy to put together, and you probably already have most of the ingredients for it. Hey everyone, I'm Obi, a home cook who wants to get you cooking authentic and delicious Middle Eastern food at home. Now this week I want to show you the beauty of roast leg of lamb done the old school Egyptian way. It's one of my all-time favourite dishes and the flavour is just to die for. If you're in the middle of planning your Christmas dinner, this will be an amazing replacement for your usual centerpiece. First, I'll show you how to marinate and cook the leg of lamb so it comes out perfectly soft. Then we'll be making some delicious roast veggies that are an amazing dish all on their own. So enough talk, let's jump right in and make this. Let's first start off by making the marinade for the lamb leg. It's a simple one that is made using a lot of onions. The onions do two things. First, they flavour the meat with loads of savoury flavour compounds, and secondly, they contain an enzyme, protease, that helps tenderise the meat. To start, we need to peel 6 to 8 large onions so that we have 1 kilogram or 2 pounds of onion flesh when done. These will be going into a blender or food processor, so cut them down to a size that's manageable for yours. For the recipe we'll also need a bunch of garlic, about 10 to 12 cloves will do fine, so it's easiest to just peel a full head. We'll be using it in the marinade and also stuffing a bunch of them into the lamb leg itself. Once you've peeled your garlic, slice them into slivers about 3mm or 1/8 of an inch thick, except for 4 cloves. Next up, add the onions into your blender or food processor, and if they don't all fit, you can put the rest in once it's blended. Also add in your 4 whole garlic cloves. To season the marinade, we'll simply be using 1 tablespoon of black pepper. You can use the pre-ground stuff, but we're blending this so it makes sense to use whole peppercorns for that freshly cracked black pepper flavour. For salt, we'll be adding in 2 tablespoons of fine cooking salt, which sounds like a lot, but it will essentially turn our marinade into a wet brine as well. And don't worry, not all of that salt will make it into the final dish. Finally, I'm adding in about 100ml or 3.3 fluid ounces of water, which will just help the blending process get started. All you need to do now is blitz this until it is very finely processed. The downside of using a blender rather than a food processor is that you'll have to scrape down the sides of the jug a few times and might not be able to fit all your onions in at once. Keep blending it until you're left with something that looks like a milkshake you wouldn't want to drink. Your onion should be processed into a fine and liquidy paste. I'd really recommend tasting this for salt, and if it doesn't taste extremely salty to you, you'll need to add more. Set it aside while we prepare the lamb. When you are buying your lamb for this dish, you have a few different options. You can either go for a full lamb leg or a shoulder. The leg is leaner and quite a bit larger, while the shoulder has more fat and will end up more tender. You also have a choice of going bone in or deboned, which makes it easier to cut and serve. What I've got is a bone in shoulder. To prepare it for marination, I'm going to remove some of the surface fat. You can ask your butcher to do this for you, or if you're doing it yourself, just use a really sharp knife. My aim here is to expose some of the meat underneath the fat, as the marinade can't penetrate it. I'm also going to remove fat in areas where it seems quite excessive, but you don't want to remove it all. This is what the shoulder looked like when I was done trimming it. With that done, we can move on to marinating the lamb, and the first thing we need to do is poke your lamb full of holes. In each hole we'll add in 1 or 2 whole peppercorns and a chunk of the sliced garlic from earlier. You want to do this all over and then on the underside as well. They'll all receive the same treatment of garlic and peppercorns, and you should do about 15 to 20 of these over the surface of your lamb. When done, your lamb will look something like this. To apply the marinade, get a deep dish of some sort and place some of the marinade in it. Lay your lamb leg on top and press the marinade into the lamb. You want to aim for full coverage of the joint. This marinade is enough for a 2.5 kilogram or 5.5 pound bone-in lamb shoulder, so scale it up for a larger one. When you've finished coating the top and bottom, yours should look something like this. Cover it with plastic wrap and place it in the fridge to marinate for a minimum of 12 hours. My fridge really isn't big enough for this tray, so I usually end up placing the lamb inside a Ziploc bag instead. The next day, your lamb is ready to go into the oven. I recommend taking it out of the fridge at least 1 hour beforehand. There's only a couple of things that need doing before it goes in the oven. First, we need to remove all of the onion marinade from the meat. Use your hands to scrape it off and be sure to clear out the little nooks and crannies. I'd also recommend using a paper towel to scrape any last stubborn bits of marinade off. Once it's been cleaned, you can see how much the marinade penetrated. The fat is now tinted yellow from the onions and the redness of the meat has faded. Now to bake it, I will be using this deep roasting tray, which has a wire rack that keeps the lamb from sitting on the base of the tray. This helps prevent it from burning and sticking, though you can easily accomplish the same thing by lining your tray with thick cut discs of onion. Place your lamb in the tray, and then the last thing to do is grate nutmeg all over the meat. You want a light dusting of it on the top and bottom sides. So all that's left to do is preheat the oven to 180 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit and tightly cover our roasting dish with a sheet of aluminium foil. And a quick tip, if your foil isn't wide enough, you can double the width of a sheet by placing 2 sheets on top of each other and folding the long edge over itself a few times. Place the sheet onto the roasting dish and crimp any excess foil over the edges so it forms as tight a seal as possible. Then when it's ready, it should go into the oven for 3 to 4 hours, and it will stay in there until a dinner knife can easily be poked into the meat. While the lamb is cooking, we can prepare some damn good roast vegetables. For this, we'll be using carrots, potatoes, and mini onions. We'll start off by peeling and then slicing 500 grams or 1 pound of carrots into chunks about 1 centimeter or half an inch thick. For the mini potatoes, I have scrubbed 600 grams or 1.3 pounds of them clean. The smaller ones I will be cooking whole and the larger ones will be cut in half. You could use regular potatoes here and just cut them down to size. Then for the onions, I am peeling 500 grams or 1 pound of miniature onions. You can use shallots here instead if you can't find them. When all of your vegetables are ready, we can make their own marinade. I'll start by pulling the lamb out of the oven at about the 2-hour mark, and I'll add about 200 milliliters or 6.6 fluid ounces of water to the baking pan. This will deglaze any juices that have dried onto it. Let it sit for a few minutes, then using a spatula, agitate the bits of dried on lamb juice. When the liquid has darkened, collect it and place the lamb back in the oven. In my blender once more, I have placed 1 large onion, which has been roughly chopped. To that, I'll add in 100 milliliters or 3.3 fluid ounces of the deglazed lamb juices, as well as 1 teaspoon of salt and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Blend it all together into a fine paste and then pour it out onto your vegetables. I've placed them in a foil-lined baking sheet, then given it all a very thorough mix. Once all your vegetables have been coated, they should go into the same oven to bake for 1 hour. So I'd place them in once the lamb has been in there for 2.5 hours, so that they finish at the same time. Now I'd recommend to check your lamb at 2.5 and 3 hours for doneness by poking it with a knife. Once you feel it is almost as soft as you want it, remove the foil and allow it to brown thoroughly on top. After 3.5 hours of cooking, my lamb was finally done, and I pulled it out of the oven. It may look dark on camera, but that's just the outermost layer of fat getting a deep browning. As you can see, I can easily poke my knife into the meat, and there is very little resistance, which is exactly what I wanted. For the vegetables, they have cooked through completely and softened. The mixture we added to them has reduced and caramelized. You should let the lamb rest for 15 to 30 minutes before carving and serving, so that the juices in it can redistribute. When you are ready, you should cut it into slices about 1 centimeter or half an inch thick. If you're using a bone-in shoulder, then you might want to wriggle the shoulder blade back and forth until you can pull it out. This will make your life easier when carving it. Serve it up with the roast vegetables, and one little tip that will make it absolutely stunning is to remove one of the carved slices so you can see the cross section of the lamb joint. Sit back and be sure to watch your guests' faces as they dig into some of the best lamb of their lives. So I've been drooling over this for an hour while I film all the B-roll and do thumbnails. I've resisted long enough, so it is time to dig in. I've almost finished my plate, that's how good this is. The lamb is just so incredibly soft and moist. It's been cooked so long that it melts in your mouth. The marinade really gives the lamb an umami savoury flavour while reducing the gaminess that lamb can sometimes have. Because it's cooked so long, the flavours are really concentrated, and it's the same story for the vegetables as well. The onions, carrots and potatoes are all incredibly soft, while having a mouth-watering flavour from the onion mixture that was added to them. I really hope you give this one a try, as I'm certain you'll enjoy it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like or comment and share it with your friends. And if you make this, be sure to send me some photos. That's it for now, and I'll be back next week with another recipe.